No, you don't need the.
I'm doing this my way. He a legend. 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 Welcome to the league. 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 Welcome to the league. To the league. To the league. To the league. To the league of items.
Pico money, Pico money, Pico money. We making Pico money. Payday, about to throw a rack on China. Need some DFS advice, where can I find some? League of Items got the sheet with all the lineups and all the stacks that you need to get to diamond. League of Items!
Getting gold, that's the goal. Keep on winning on a roll. Kill 4 dragons, got soul. Now you got nowhere to go. Teleporting top to bot. Dive your carry on the spot. That's an ace, wreck your base. Wear my crown, we on top.
It's the league. It's the league. It's the league. It's the league. It's the league.
Had to give the full one.
Welcome to the league. To the league. To the league. To the league.
Had to do it one time. Whew. All right. League of Legends 2022. We're in the summer split. I'm going to try and put together a global tier list. This is going to take some time to iron out the details. Basically, in my spreadsheet, I have something that I call like tier differential for betting. So it's basically, if you are in the same tier, it's approximately a 50-50. One team will be favored, but it's basically a 50-50. If you're one tier different, it's 60-40. 2 tiers difference, 70-30. 3 tier difference is 80-20. And then a 4 tier difference is 90-10. And it's not supposed to be precise, but it gives me a general idea of how I feel about teams. So in this video, you're going to see a picture, or I guess, yeah, it's basically a picture that I have in a spreadsheet. I'm going to go from the bottom tier and work my way up. Not every region has teams in every tier, but let's just get into that. But before we do that, I want to get to 1,000 subscribers. So I'm about 25 subscribers away. I want to get to that number, and in order to do that, I'm willing to do a giveaway. So the plan is once for every subscriber that I get, which I need about 25, I'll do a $10 giveaway per subscriber. And then once we hit that, I'll do another $10. So I'll do like basically $500 worth of giveaways once we get to 1,000 subscribers. So if you like the content and you want me to keep producing the content, make sure to get me to 1,000, share it with your friends, tell people to subscribe, and I'll be doing $500 worth of giveaways once we hit 1,000 subscribers. So let's get into it. So like I said, this is in Excel. This is just a visual that I have for me. So from left to right, it's LPL, LCK, LEC, LCS. This bottom tier are the worst teams from the region that I think have no chance to do anything in the short term and no chance to do anything in the long term. I'm not going to spend any time talking about them. We have Astralis and we have CLG. Then in the next tier, these are teams that I think, even if they make playoffs, it means absolutely nothing. Nobody believes in these teams. Nobody thinks that they're going... Well, my justification for putting them in here isn't that nobody believes in them or like is rooting for them. It's just I don't like the roster for one reason or another, and even if I don't expect them to make playoffs, and even if they do make playoffs, they're not going to make a run. Like in some regions, just because the number of teams, teams will end up making it into playoffs when they don't deserve it. Let me just get the CLG roster. So CLG, basically, they made one switch. They went from Jenkins to Dokla. I think that's actually moving in the wrong direction. So kind of had to penalize them for that. And then Astralis, just a bad roster overall. They made some of the changes that I was asking for. But, Visit Chachi and Xerxes, they're not going to be difference makers, I don't think, in the LEC. So next up, let's go to the LPL, and we have our first round of teams in the LPL. So in the LPL, there are 17 teams. These are 3 of the worst teams. It's not that they cannot finish higher than the bottom 3 spots. It's just I don't really expect them to. So we have LGD, World Elite and Thundertalk Gaming. I really liked World Elite at different points last year, and I think that giving up Breathe was a mistake, and then giving up Elk was a mistake. So if they were able to kind of keep that core together, they made a run a little while ago. That would have been a legit roster. For Thundertalk Gaming, we had UCal come over. Some people want to believe in UCal. Personally, I don't. Beishwan, a former FPX jungler, he's on Thundertalk Gaming. Not enough talent there overall for me. And then LGD is just a pretty horrible roster altogether. And again, I don't. If there are some young players on these teams that I don't know anything about, then sure, this can look very wrong a couple months from now. But there's nothing that I've seen, and this is just based off of what I've seen or heard. There's nothing that I believe in with these teams. Then in the LCK, we have Hanwha Life, Live Sandbox, and Fredit Brion. So again, these are just teams that, especially in a region like the LCK, you have 10 teams. One of these teams will be, in playoff contention, but there are at least four teams in the LCK that are significantly better, in my mind, than these teams. So Hanwha Life, yeah, just bad roster overall. Sandbox, Closer's okay, but again, not a huge fan. And then Fredit Brion, I'm bad with Fredit Brion. I just never get them right, so you'll have to go to somebody else for Fredit Brion takes. I am just not a reliable source of information on that one, and I'm fully aware of it. Then we have SK Gaming and Team BDS. I'm really thinking about putting Team BDS down into the lower tier. Yeah, I'm gonna do that right now. So they're down here, and then SK Gaming. I think SK Gaming will be more competitive than both of those teams just because of the roster stability. That's basically it. And then we have Immortals. I've been very negative towards Immortals. All of last split, I was really beating up on them pretty bad. Revenge. The reason why I was so critical is because their strategy was to build around Revenge. Revenge is not good enough or young enough to build a roster around, in my opinion. And they're not competitive now. So the changes that they made, they went from Xerxes to Kenvi. I don't know much about Kenvi. They still have Power of Evil, who's a solid mid laner, can start on a lot of LCS level teams. And then they swapped out their bot lane, and now they have Lost and Ignar. Lost is probably a side grade. Ignar is probably an upgrade. Ignar is a very good player, very experienced player, hyper aggressive, and is good in this type of meta that I think we're moving into, where there are a lot of different options for supports. And Ignar at his peak, I think he was at his best during the Senna Kench. It was the Senna Kench meta, but you could play other champions with Senna, like I think he was playing Leona with it, and I think he was also playing Pantheon with it. So that's also when like Ghost and Beryl were doing really well, that style of meta, and I think Ignar can play that type of support role. So I like that. Let's keep moving. Okay, so now we are... this is a majority of the teams, I think, in this level right here. And I like the teams to different extents. It's tough ranking these teams across regions because it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I think that teams like Rare Atom, OMG, and Ultra Prime specifically they have really good upside if they were in a different region, but they will most likely not be competitive in their region. I'm not a huge fan of Rare Atom. So we have Cube, Leon, Strive, iBoy, and Yuyan Ja. If Strive ends up being good and Leon is able to play really well this split, then Rare Atom will be most likely the last team into the playoffs, or the second to last team in the playoffs. But you don't really get points for making the playoffs. I want teams that have a chance like to make Worlds or make a run at Worlds. OMG, they actually just made a substitution. They were playing 0909 instead of Cream. I think that Cream is a very good mid laner, and I'm shocked that they kind of made this move. I hope that he moves on to a different roster. I think that there are a lot of teams that would greatly benefit from picking up Cream. I just don't know if they're actually going to pull the trigger on something like that. For example, Ultra Prime. I think Ultra Prime going from a player like Cryan to Cream would be huge for them. And I like Ultra Prime a lot. Zoom is a good player. Hacker is not great. I'm not a huge Hacker fan. Cryan, I think, has severe limitations. He's a similar style of player to Humanoid and Niski, where it's really about roaming, helping other players on their team, and it's not really about them dominating their own lane, which I think is a problem. It's a problematic playstyle. And then we have Elk and Xiaoxi, and Elk and Xiaoxi is like an extremely good bot lane. They didn't play well in their match today, but they're very good long-term talent-wise, in my opinion. Next up, we have Anyone's Legends. I know a lot of people that I talk to about League of Legends like Anyone's Legend. I don't. I would probably be okay putting them down a tier, but out of respect for the other people that talk highly of them, I'm going to throw them up here. And then with Invictus Gaming, we have a relatively young roster, and it'd be cool if they ended up figuring it out. I think that Shun has shown flashes. Zika has shown flashes. Yukai didn't do as well last split as I kind of hoped. But this is the kind of team where you might see them like make a run for playoffs, but they're not going to make a run throughout playoffs. Then we go into the LCK, and this is really the big difference between the LCK and the LPL. These LCK teams, they probably belong in this tier because I don't think they're as good as the other teams in the region, but they don't belong next to teams like Rare Atom, OMG, and Ultra Prime. So for Nongshim was a big disappointment last split. They have Kana, Dread, BDD, Ghost, and Effort. I think that Kana is one of the best top laners in the world. If they are able to play around Kana, they're going to be a very strong team. If they are dependent on Ghost carrying them, they will not be a good team. It's really that simple for me. KT Rolser, Rascal Cuz, Arya, or Vikla. I'm not sure which one's going to be playing more often. And then we have Aiming and Life. I think that Arya's okay, Aiming's pretty good. Cuz, came from the T1 system, so you have to kind of trust it a little bit. And then Rascal is a league average top laner at worst. So again, a relatively solid roster. They're probably going to look good against teams like Hama Life, Live Sandbox, and Fred Brion, or against the other teams in their tier. But it'll be surprising when they beat a team that's above them. Then we have Kwangdong Freaks, Keen, Elim, Fate, Teddy, Hoyt. So, a lot of people like Keen. I don't think that he can be the winning difference against the teams that are above him. Teddy's still a good player. If this was last year, I guess last split I was more hyped to have Teddy on a different roster. And then we have a couple players that were on T1 at some point. Fate is a pretty good mid laner, but again, they can't really compete with the teams above them. Going into the LEC, we have Misfits, XL, and Mad Lions. So now they have Irrelevant in the top lane. I don't think that change is going to mean much for them. It's not going to be a big upgrade over Hyrit. Schlatan was exposed in playoffs as a one-trick. We all kind of knew it, but it's going to be a problem unless he can expand that champion pool, especially in a meta where champion diversity is going to be something that teams can utilize during the draft phase to counterpick the enemy team. If you're constantly picking Lee Sin and that's really the only thing that you can do, it's going to get exploited. Vetio, good mid laner, maybe even a great mid laner, but we need to see more from him. Neon was a big beneficiary from the Jinx Aphelios meta. His team was constantly drafting better than other teams because they were just buying into that idea, and his win rates were really high on those champions. And then Mursa is, a good but not great support, but he's not going to hurt you for the most part. XL, we have Finn, Marcoon, Nuke Duck, Patrick, and Mickey X. They overperformed last split, but I do think that, we can see them kind of run it back and have a similar performance, but the team that you need to be watching out for is probably Mad Lions. Armut, Elyoya, Niski, Unforgiven, and Kaiser. Elyoya with Niski is probably going to be better than Elyoya plus Reeker because Niski is a good mid laner for a jungle-focused team. He is going to be willing to sacrifice resources in a similar way to Humanoid, where Elyoya will be the beneficiary. If teams are lazily picking junglers, Elyoya is going to exploit that. I am not a big Elyoya fan. I think he's overrated, but after last split, I think that public sentiment is finally reaching a reasonable level. So now I can talk more, try to talk more accurately about a player like Elyoya. But again, these teams, I think that a lot of these teams will end up in playoffs. I don't expect them to have a realistic chance to win the playoffs. If they're in the semifinals, I'll probably be betting against them. if they're in the finals, I will almost definitely be betting against them. And you might ask yourself, why? The reason is because I try to focus on long-term talent, not recent performances. That's just the better way to bet in my mind. People like Jay Skelts, he is kind of somewhere in the middle, and he is a well-informed guy, and, you know, I respect his opinion. So there's probably some happy medium between the two of us where, you know, I should be adjusting a little more and he should be adjusting a little less. But, you know, we're representing two different sides of the same coin, which is ultimately, you know, profitable betting, or like close to profitable betting. And then last but not least, we have the LCS. So first up we have, and this isn't necessarily in order for these teams outside of the top tiers. I have 21 teams that I'm going to rank after this in order. So first up we have Dignitas, Gamsu, River, Blue, Neo, Biofrost. I don't think that going from swapping top laners is not going to make a big difference for Dignitas going from Fake God to Gamsu. It's probably going to be a side grade. Fake God had a bad last split, but, you know, it's really not changing much by bringing in Gamsu. Next up we have FlyQuest. FlyQuest did well last split. They brought in a new top laner, so now they have Philip. Do I think that Philip is going to be some kind of huge difference maker in the top lane? Probably not. I don't know much about him. I don't really know anything about him besides his name is Philip. Then we have Jose Diodo, Tukui, Johnson, and Aframu. Tukui had a good split. Jose Diodo has been perpetually overrated, but this might actually be an okay meta for him. You know, if they're able to make something happen, again, I'm going to still be betting against them in the playoffs. Then we have Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians surprisingly brought back Stixay. So Licorice, Pride Stalker, Blaze Olive, 6A, Ole. Pride Stalker is the player that the team kind of needs to operate around, and if they're able to pull that off, that'd be pretty impressive. I don't really expect it to work out though. And then we have TSM, and right before I made this video, I was looking at different prop bets, and Bet365 has a to make the playoffs bet, and TSM was plus 400, so I put down $100 on TSM to make the playoffs. With a roster like Huni, Spica, Maple, Tactical, and Shen Yi, or even a different support, I don't really care who the support is, for this roster, it's just as good, if not better, than those other teams that I just stated. 8 teams qualify for the playoffs, so, you know, I feel pretty good about that bet. Huni is still good enough to be on a playoff team. Spica is one of the best junglers in the region. Maple, I think that the Maple signing might be a little, you know, not overrated, but it's not going to have as big of an impact as some people might think it will. Their mid laner that came in last split, I think, did an okay job at the end of the split. And then Tactical is a good but not great player, definitely good enough to be on a playoff team. And then Shen Yi has the upside of being a really good playmaker. We haven't seen it yet though. So now we are going to go into the top 21 teams, right? So here are the rest of the teams. These are not necessarily in order. If you're picking between two teams, I would just in general say the LPL and LCK are roughly the same. The LEC and the LCS are roughly the same. Some of you are going to disagree with that. That's fine. We're going to start at the bottom. So in 21st place right now, without any games being played and without moving teams around, just based on what I think about talent for these teams in general, I think that Cloud9 belongs in 21st place. So we have Fudge, Blabber, Jensen, Berserker, and Sven. I don't mind the Sven support role swap. I think that will ultimately be fine. He has a ton of reps in bot lane. Moving over to the support position should not be an issue for him. Bringing back Jensen, I think that it will make them a more solid team right now, but I don't think it's going to make them a team that is able to compete at Worlds. Even if they make it into quarterfinals, semifinals, I don't think they have a realistic chance of ever winning with this roster. I think that Jensen specifically would hold them back. And the one caveat to this is if Berserker ends up being great, then he can kind of make up for that. If Jensen is completely playing for the rest of his team, that might, be good enough. But I doubt that's the case, and I doubt that C9 will be good enough to be competitive at Worlds. But I do think that they will, be one of the teams competing for a world spot. 100 Thieves, Someday Closer, Abadaga, FBI, Huhi, running it back. Good team. They got dominated in the finals by EG. I don't think that would happen again. They're a pretty good roster, and I have them in 20th overall. Next up, we have Team Liquid. Team Liquid has Bwipo, Santorin, Bjergsen, Hansama, Core JJ. Very good roster, very experienced roster. I think they would be competitive against a lot of the other teams that are out of these 21 teams. They could be competitive against a lot of them, but they're not going to be the favorites against a lot of these teams. This is just the way that it kind of shakes out visually, but I think there would be some pretty big changes when I start drilling down into this. Then last but not least, we have EG. I think that EG is the best team in the LCS. I was really high on them going into MSI. I was high on them going into playoffs. I was high on them going into MSI. They underperformed at MSI. I don't think that they gave a good showing, and I think that if they had the opportunity to do it again, they would do better. I think that the summer split for EG is going to be another opportunity for them to get reps, kind of prove that they are an upper echelon team in the LCS, maybe even be a dominant team in the LCS, and then, get to Worlds. That's the goal for EG. Get to Worlds and then prove it internationally. Get into the knockout round. That's really where I think EG belongs. And I think that they have the talent to do it. They're a younger team. They might need to swap out Impact and Vulcan at some point in the future, but Inspired, Jojo Pyun, and Danny will be a very strong core for multiple years as long as they can keep everybody happy. Next up, speaking of MSI, we have G2. So G2, in my mind, was extremely overrated going into MSI. They ended up doing well against EG, and then they made it to semifinals, but so did EG. I just don't believe in this roster. This might be a good meta for them, and I've been mentioning that for the past month or so. Having huge champion pools to pick from, where you're not forced into trading one champion for one champion, allows a player like Caps to really shine, allows Broken Blade to shine, Targamas to shine. I don't think that Flocked is a good enough AD carry to carry against the best teams in the world consistently. I think that he will end up being a problem, and I think that Jankos might end up being a problem as well. They are very good at preparing. The coaching staff with Dylan Falco is a very good coaching staff. That's a way to mitigate some of these problems and talent discrepancies. But ultimately, once you start going up against the other best teams in the world, it's going to expose those issues. So I would be concerned about that. And I know that right now it's like LCS below LEC. I don't expect it to stay that way. EG will probably make it up further. Because you could say I'm biased, whatever. I'm biased. I like Evil Geniuses, and my eyes tell me that they'll be good long term. Next up, we have Fnatic. So Fnatic, we have Wonder, Razork, Humanoid, Upset, Hillsong. They're a good roster. If you told me that Rogue Vitality, Fnatic, G2 were in the semifinals, okay, that's probably what's going to happen. Not really much else to say about that. I'm still not a huge fan of Humanoid. I think it'll be funny to see Humanoid and Niski in the same league again, or going up against one another, because there are a lot of similarities, and people say that Humanoid is so much better than Niski. I don't really like either of them very much, but that's a conversation for a different day. Then we have Vitality. We have Alfari, Haru, also Bo. I'm not sure what they're doing with Bo. Perks, Karzi, Labrov. So I don't like the move going from Selfmade to Haru. It may end up being the right move, where Haru is a better stylistic fit for this team. Some people want to say, Haru was a world champion. I don't think he even played for that team. So yes, technically world champion, but not really a world champion. So it'll be interesting to see how that one kind of works out. I think that Bo is a really good player, but they have the whole match fixing issue with him. Perks was underwhelming last split, but the team did end up performing okay in playoffs. They showed glimpses of being a good team, and hopefully that is something they could build on. And then the last team in the LEC, and my selection to win the summer split is Rogue, Odoamne, Malrong, Larson, Comp, Trimby. Good team overall. I think that, I think that I was saying this in a different video. Going from Inspired to Malrong doesn't get it, like makes it seem like Inspired wasn't as important as he was. Inspired was the heart and soul of the Rogue team. Was that heart and soul sometimes very toxic and made the team not work? Sure, that probably is accurate, but I think that Inspired's talent level is extremely high. I think relative to other people at their position, he's better than Odoamne is as a top laner. He's better than Comp and Trimby are as a bot lane duo. Trimby had a good split last split. Not trying to take anything away from him. Just trying to give more credit to Inspired. But this roster, I think, is a very good roster and will be very good in summer. I guess the question would be, how does a team like this perform in a wide open meta where there are a lot of different draft options? I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. And, over the next couple of weeks, we'll get more clarity into that situation. Next up, let's go back to the LPL. I have another clump of teams. We have FPX and we have BLG. So FPX has Xiaolahu, Clid, Care, LWX, and Hong. I think the best case scenario for them, like I've been saying for other teams, is making it into playoffs. These teams are more likely to make it into playoffs than Rare Atom, OMG, Ultra Prime, Anyone's Legend, or Invictus Gaming. And it's because they have the consistency of Clid. I think that Clid is going to be, gank heavy jungler, setting up the rest of his team. LWX can still carry. He had some glimpses last split that were pretty impressive. Care is someone that has good upside. I'm not 100% convinced in Care yet. I think, again, if you took Cream and put him onto FPX, now you have a very interesting team. But that's not the way that it is yet. Then we have BLG. BLG has been coming over from RNG, Weiwei, Fofo, Doggo, and Crisp. Weiwei had a really solid Graves game today, not because he's a fantastic Graves player, but because the matchup was very good for him. The other team locked in Lee Sin, they countered it with Graves, and then he just dominated the game. Those are the kinds of things that I want to see from my teams in the draft phase, and BLG has been a horrible drafting team for over a year, so I'm glad that something like that happened today for them. Then we have one of my favorite teams from the LCK, DRX. So I've been super high on DRX since Worlds 2020, or like Summer 2020, because Piosik is a very good jungler. Piosik is a huge difference maker, and now they also have Zika coming over originally from Korea, went to China to play for Koma, and then came back to the LCK. So Kingen, Piosik, Zika, Deft, Beryl. Kingen is a good enough player, league average at worst. Piosik is an elite jungler. I really do believe in his talent long term. He's a big difference maker. Zika, very good jungler, has very high carry potential, but can also play the humanoid style of like being more helpful for his team and giving away resources. I do not like it when they play that way, but when you have a player like Piosik, you do want to play that style sometimes. He pulled out a Kindred game today and was very good. So like Kindred Galio, for example, is something that I could see happening throughout the split. Then we have Deft and Beryl. Beryl, very good engaged support. Deft, very classy AD carry. Has been great for a long time and shows no signs of slowing down, really. Is he at his peak form? No. But he is definitely good enough to make it to Worlds. He's been doing that for, most of his career. Next up, we're going back to the LPL, and we have a handful of teams here, and I'm going to go in order. So first up, we have former world champions EDG. I don't think I believe in this team making it back to Worlds. I think that they're going to have some issues. Viper is still one of the best AD carries in the world, but I'm not convinced that AD carry will be the most important position in the summer split. I think that there is too much champion diversity, so it's not going to be like, oh, one team has Jinx or Aphelios as a hyper carry, the other team has, some utility AD carry trying to counter it. it's going to be a lot of volatile matchups that are just going to it's going to put such a large premium on the drafting phase that EDG didn't have to navigate before. I could be completely wrong about that in terms of EDG's ability to draft in that way, but they seemed to be at their best when the meta was almost completely locked down and predictable. Next up, we have JDG, and this one next up we have Weibo Gaming. Weibo Gaming, aka The Shining. I love Weibo Gaming. They are one of my favorite teams, and like I always find myself just picking them to win matches because I want them to win matches, which is not good. They have The Shy, who is one of the most underrated players in the world, which is crazy to say because he's former world champion. People know how good he is, but people put too much weight into like the games that he just dies a ton. So we have The Shy, SFM, Angel, Huanfeng on. Huanfeng is the heart and soul of this team. He is the carry upside on this team. This is a good meta for them because he can play the utility style, but he also has the hard carry upside. So I think Huanfeng will be able to take advantage of this huge champion pool that AD carries are allowed to play right now. If it gets nailed down, he is never out of the meta, basically. He's always performing at an extremely high level. And they are the team that I'm the most different on from the market, I think. I have a lot of faith in their ability to perform. And if they ended up winning the summer split, I wouldn't be surprised at all. But I don't have them as one of the top teams. Well, they are one of the top teams, but, there's 7 teams from the LPL in this portion of the list. Next up, we have JDG. So 369 was... kind of scapegoated on top esports. I knew that was kind of silly. Still a pretty good top laner, and has that 9 upside. So I guess you can't really feel too bad about it having him on your team. Kanavi, one of the best junglers in the world. Yagao, this is a great meta for Yagao. He can play things like Zoe, and that's going to be pretty impactful. We've already seen it this split, I believe. Then we have Hope and Missing. Hope did a good job last split, and I expect that to continue. Missing, pretty good support player. Doesn't seem to, create big issues for his team often. Then we have V5. I think that V5 is overrated right now. Rich is overrated. Karsa is probably a little overrated. Rookie is not in the LPL. He's not in China right now, I think, so Dream is playing for them. Then we have Photic and PP God. I think that they are a good but not great team. I think that by the end of the season, teams like JDG, Weibo, EDG will probably overtake V5, but we'll have to see how that plays out. I just think that the public consensus on them is too high at this point. So that's one change that I would probably should make. Now we have to go back to the LCK. So we have 2 teams from the LCK now. We have Damwon and we have Genji. So Nuguri's coming back. That's going to help them a lot. Birdall is a more flippy player, has good carry upside, but just isn't consistent enough for a team that wants to depend on Canyon and Showmaker. And today they had 2 matches, or they had 1 match. They had 2 games with like less than 10 kills. Super boring to watch, but it shows how good Damwon are at controlling the pace of the game, and how afraid teams are to be aggressive against them. So Canyon and Showmaker, one of the best mid-jungle duos in the world, if not the best. Nuguri, good weak side top laner, plays an insane Kennen. That's always going to be usable in League of Legends, that style of champion where you just have gigantic AoE ultimates. Then we have Genji. I prefer Genji slightly to Damwon, and I think that it really comes down to Ruler. Ruler is arguably the best AD carry in the world. Chovy, everybody agrees that he's one of the best mid laners in the world. We haven't seen it play out on the international stage yet, but in order to get to the international stage, you want somebody like Chovy. Then we have Peanut. Peanut is a very good jungler. Doran is a probably league average top laner, but he's not going to kill you. And then Lehens is a very good support. So it's just a really solid roster overall. If they didn't make it to semifinals, it'd be kind of a shock. So that's really where I'm at on Genji. Now let's go back to China. So we have 2 more teams from China. We have Top Esports, We have Wayward, Tion, Knight, Jackie Love, and... Well, I don't know if it's Mark or Joao. I'm not sure who the long-term support's going to be. Right now, I think it's Mark. Wayward, going from Zoom to Wayward has worked out so far. I think that it's been a little overblown, the success they've enjoyed with Wayward, but it's a really good roster. Knight is one of the best mid laners in the world. Jackie Love is a very aggressive AD carry. This is the type of meta that you want a player like Jackie Love, because when he's not playing Jinx and Aphelios, his value to the team, or his importance to the team, is reduced a little bit from like a team comp perspective. So now he's on a utility AD carry. His aggression is not as easily punished. He's going to be able to kind of force the issue and provide engage opportunities for his team and just be hyper aggressive. And that's really when Jackie Love is at his best. Sometimes it looks horrible and he makes huge mistakes, but I'd rather have somebody making those huge mistakes, but also those huge plays, because without taking a risk, you can't have that huge reward. Then we have LNG. So LNG is the team that I expected to have number one in China until a roster move was made by a different team. So we have Ale, Tarzan, Duanbi, Light, Lumao, and I think it's going to be Elwandi. Lumao was accused of match fixing, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's kind of gone, or at least kind of dealing with some kind of huge penalty or suspension or benching. Tarzan and Duanbi are one of the best jungle mid duos in the world. They're on a different level. Both of them have insane champion pools. They can play basically anything. Ale, a lot of people wanted to give Ale like the moniker of being the best top laner in the world after Worlds last year. Anybody who, really watches this consistently and doesn't have insane takes knew that was kind of overblown. Ale is a good player, though, definitely has carry upside, but to think that he was one of the best top laners in the world was kind of insane. But he's definitely good enough to be on one of the best teams in the world. It's just he is not making most of that difference. Light had a solid year last year and is a solid player. I believe in this roster very much. I think whenever you have Duanbi, he can kind of take any four players, figure out how to get them to a world championship. So I have a lot of faith in LNG. Once they get there, I don't know how it's going to go. It depends on the meta, but I believe in a team like LNG. Now, we have the number one team from the LCK, T1. Would I be shocked if Damwon or Genji were able to overtake T1 in the summer split? No. But there's no reason to put them above T1 yet. Zeus, Owner, Faker, Gumayusi, Keria. So we have Zeus, who I think is probably overrated right now. When you have that many wins in a row, everybody's going to think, oh, wow, this guy doesn't make any mistakes. It's not the case. They've just been winning so much that it's tough to remember what it looks like when they're losing. We saw a little bit of losing at MSI. But, I just don't expect the same performance from last split, and I think that Zeus is one of the easiest players to kind of regress. Owner, kind of the same thing. Owner had some really good performances at Worlds, though, too, and has shown carry upside. Some of his Viego plays are kind of insane. I think that is more sustainable than a player like Zeus, who's kind of benefiting from the rest of the team's success. Not saying that he has no contribution to the team, but he is not the focal point of the team. Faker, one of the best mid laners of all time, one of the best players of all time. There's nothing you can really say negatively about Faker. Gumayusi and Keria. Keria is the best support in the world. That's, I think, decided now. I've been saying that for about 2 years. And this is going to be the best meta possible for Keria. He can play anything. He can play any champion in the game as a support. And you're going to think to yourself, oh, why have I never played that before? That's the level that he's at. And then Gumayusi. I think that Gumayusi... it's not that I think he's not good. I think that Gumayusi's probably... He's for sure a top 10 AD carry in the world right now. It would be tough to say that he's not. I just think that a lot of what he's able to accomplish is because Keria is wild. But again, I'm not trying to take anything away from Gumayusi. That roster, extremely good. I think it's a clear top 3 in LCK. We have T1, Genji, Dom1 Gaming. I want DRX to be competitive with those teams. I'm not 100% sure that's the case. So I could see DRX kind of falling in this list a little bit. But I would also kind of not be shocked if Piosik was able to bring up the level of his teammates as well. Not to say that, Zika and Deft and Beryl are not capable of those higher highs. It's just it'd be tough for them to do it without a player like Piosik on their team. And it's going to be somewhat unique. It's a somewhat unique style of League of Legends that DRX will have to play in order to be successful. And then the number 1 team in the world right now, it's tough to say that it's any team other than RNG. After MSI, I was prepared to actively bet against RNG for the entire summer split. It's a great kind of spot normally, but going from Bin to Breathe is a huge upgrade stylistically. I think that Breathe and Bin are similar talent levels. If you look at my top lane tier list from before the spring split, I had both Bin and Breathe in the top tier, I believe, if I recall correctly, or at least in the same tier, but they are different stylistically. I think Breathe is more likely to carry for his team than Bin, or at least the way that they do it is different. Breathe can be the focal point of a team. Like, you can play around his side of the map. Bin, I think, is more of split pusher, leave him alone, let him do his thing, and then maybe he'll come around for a really good flank, or maybe he'll get a random pentakill. Breathe, when World Elite was good and like making a run in playoffs, it was Breathe, Beishang, and they were kind of just dominant at that point in the early game and the mid game. And then Elk, who was Jiaomeng at that point, it was Jiaomeng and missing. They were just playing really well, like conservative League of Legends, would group up around things like Rift Herald and Dragon, but Breathe and Beishang were the ones that were forcing a lot of the issues on the map. And then they had utility mid laner. I forget what his name was, but everybody kind of knew that he was the weak point of the team. And it's the same thing that, a team with Cryin, a team with Humanoid, a team with Niski, these players who are very good at that like Galio TF style, and then pretty good at the rest of them, at like a professional level at the rest of them, but is not elite at those other styles. So we have that for Breathe. Wei is a good jungler, but he is not an elite jungler in the world. You have basically an elite top laner. You have an elite mid laner in Xiaohu. You have Gala, who is a very explosive AD carry. I think that Gala is overrated. Like, people want to say that he's one of the best AD carries in the world. I don't think that he is, because if you took, Ruler, Viper, and put them onto RNG, I think they'd be a better team overall. And there are other AD carries that I'm not thinking of right now, but there are AD carries that I think you put them onto this roster, they're just a better team. Because the other players are just more, they're just better at different play styles, they're more diverse. Like with Xiaohu, you could put Faker on there. You could put Showmaker, Chovy, someone like Rookie, someone like Knight. You're not going to get an upgrade. It's going to be different, but it's not going to be better necessarily. It depends on the meta. For the AD carry stuff, I think you could actually find better AD carries. And then you have Ming. Ming's a very good support. The only level of support that I think is higher than a player like Ming is somebody like Keria, but there's only one Keria in the world. So that's basically it. That's my first pass at the global tier list and my top 21. I think that, the next time that I do this video, probably a couple weeks from now, it'll make more sense visually. This is just, trying to get everything into the region specifically, and then I'll break it down. You'll get more separation between teams like this and teams like this, and it'll make more sense, like, if these two teams were to play against one another, which team should I pick, that kind of thing. But that's basically it. Like I said, once we get to 1,000 subscribers, I will be doing $500 worth of giveaways. So help me get to 1,000, and you will have a chance to win a portion of $500. Or if you think I should just do one $500 giveaway, I probably won't do that. I'll probably do, like 5 $100 giveaways or something like that. That'd probably be better. Or, well, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. So that's all I've got for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.